93. This is Amon Asha Renew from AshaRenew.com. And now we will cover Pope Francis says he needs to pull back on travel or possibly retire. Because recently he had took a trip to Canada to apologize to the indigenous people for cultural genocide. For those who don't know, in Canada, there were Catholic schools that took children from their parents and forced them to adopt a more American lifestyle, teaching them English. Basically, they had to completely abandon their native language, their native culture, their native traditions, and become what we see today. Pope Francis acknowledged Saturday that he can no longer travel like he used to because of his strained knee ligaments, saying his week-long Canadian pilgrimage was a bit of a test that shows he needs to slow down and one day possibly retire. This is because of all the karmic energy that came from what occurred in Canada, as well as what occurred in America, where they had these schools that took children away from their homes, away from their parents, and they were forced to be what they were not. And they have been bearing this burden. So like I was saying in last video, all of this karmic debt is now rising up to the surface. So that's why we're seeing all these events, all these karmic events, like I spoke about in the last video about the Nazi watch, Hitler's watch being sold and the Jewish people not being happy about it. All this karmic energy is now rising to the surface because it's been hidden. They never wanted to admit that anything like this ever happened. But it was just too much evidence. They kept finding evidence. They kept finding body after body after body underneath these schools. And it just was too egregious to ignore. Now let's give some more quotes here. Because, they're speaking about him traveling. Because he had to use a wheelchair, a walker, and a cane to get around, sharply limiting his program and ability to mingle with crowds. He strained his right knee ligaments earlier this year, and continuing laser and magnetic therapy forced him to cancel a trip to Africa that was scheduled for the first week of July. So we see the Pope has been traveling, asking for forgiveness and, just being the Pope. But this has been putting so much karmic energy. It's been awakening so much karmic energy. You see that it's damn near about to force him into retirement. That's just how heavy these karmic forces is. And here we see at the end of his 6-day tour, he appeared in good spirits and energetic. Despite a long day traveling to the edge of the Arctic on Friday to again apologize to indigenous peoples for the injustices they suffered in Canada's church-run residential schools. So, things like this don't necessarily happen too often, where the Pope, who is the head honcho of the Catholic energy, of the Catholic Church, went to Canada to apologize to the people because it just simply could not be ignored. Meaning he had to come there to Canada in person. And they even put, the feather crown on top of his head. He had to come directly because of this. Again, they just couldn't hide it anymore. Right? And here's more. In other comments aboard the plane, Francis agreed that the attempt to eliminate indigenous culture in Canada through a church-run residential school system amounted to a cultural genocide. So even though he didn't actually use that term when he was there, he still had to admit that this was a cultural genocide. We literally destroyed the culture of these people to assimilate them into our culture. At the time, again, it's the same way where with slavery in America, it's basically the same thing that happened. Your native language was taken, your culture was taken. If you show any remnants of that culture, you were put to death or severely punished. So we thought that this was just taking place in America, but as we see, this was also taking place in Canada. But of course, they don't call it slavery, they call it cultural genocide. So they're being more politically correct. But it was also the Pope, not this same Pope, not Pope Francis, but the Pope of the time, that gave an okay to slavery. So it was the Pope that okayed slavery, that made it, you can say, legal, the same way that the Pope before him made that legal. So somehow it always comes back to the Pope. And we experience this cultural genocide. The Pope always gave the thumbs up for this madness. And this is why you see he's like I gotta retire. I gotta step to the side. This is weighing so much on his body because that karmic energy is so heavy. And basically, if he did not do what he did, you can say he would have had to step aside in a dishonorable discharge instead of an honorable discharge, in other words. Because they were raising this issue. The Canadian indigenous people were raising this issue over and over. I've been hearing about this for years now. They've been raising this issue. And it's to the point they kept pointing at the Pope, like, the Pope made this possible. The Pope is a reason why, we're in the situation we're in, because so many of our people their culture had to be destroyed in order for them to survive. The same thing again with slavery. You had to destroy your culture in order to preserve your life. And it was okayed by the highest chambers of the church. And this essentially made the church more wealthy. All right, so let me go back to the picture of his face. So the church has been doing this for hundreds of years. It's just now all this karmic energy is now rising up to the surface. And it's taking a great toll on this man, as you see, to the point where he's not even going to be able to travel like he has been. And basically the duty of the Pope is to travel and to, make amends to the people. And he's not even going to be able to do that. And this is just how heavy the karmic energy is. So just bringing this to everyone's attention for those who may not understand why this is happening. We may have seen this, but this is why it's happening because of, once again, the Jupiter retrograde, the Neptune retrograde. It's a lot of karmic forces that have been hidden that we were supposed to forget, but we simply will not be able to forget it. And that's why the Pope had to apologize for the part that the church played in this cultural genocide. And again, we're going to continue to see more and more of these stories pop up about all these karmic energies coming to the surface about things that we try to bury and forget about. We're going to see a lot more of this happen in America and a lot more of these things happening all around the world. That's probably why he wanted to go to Africa as well, to apologize for what occurred in Africa. But we'll save that for a different time. And I have one more video that I need to knock out before we are finished with these events. So I'll see you there. 93, 93, 93.